Hello, thank you so much for tuning into this episode of the Gold Pill podcast with Amy and Meredith. And we have an amazing guest today. His name is Erik. Hi, Erik.
Hello.
What's up, Erik?
What's up?
What's up, guys? Good to be here.
Hey,
very good to have you. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I'm excited Erik, to get into some craziness.
Yes, us too, for sure. We've been looking forward to this one.
Yeah.
Definitely not on this one. We were, me and Meredith kind of like did a once over of our Patreons when we first met each other and realized that we had a lot of people in common, like just lots of podcasts that we listened to. And I think that we would probably have a similar journey. I know that's how we met, was through Emily's kind of cafe, and it sort of catapulted from there. Just kind of getting to know lots of people in the community. And you had a really neat like show that you were doing called the Esoteric Journey. And I was just wondering, how did you, like, what was your awakening process, or like, what's your whole background with any of this that got you here today?
Wow. I guess I'll just take it back to the beginning, which for me was around 2006, sometime in the summer, fall of, maybe it was like 2005, beginning of 2006. I was living in Kansas City at the time, and I was attending a junior college. I had just gotten out of the military and had, just recently gotten married and started a family and, had a kid. And so I was wanting to further my education because I was still very much, tied into the system. And I never felt like I was a part of the world in a way. I always felt like an outsider. But when it comes to like, the truth of this reality, I was certainly not aware of most of the things that I am now. So I was very naive, and I met this guy in this math class I was taking, and his name is John Preston. I still remember his name to this day. And I didn't spend much time with this guy, but he put a bug in my ear. He would say little things and tell me to go and listen to something. And he suggested I go and listen to the Coast to Coast radio with Art Bell.
Oh, yes. Wow.
And so I was driving to the grocery store one evening shortly after that, and they had this guy on there who was talking about the craziness around the number 9 and how interesting the number 9 was. And I was struggling with math at the time. Like, I had never been very good at math. I just don't think the way my brain works, people weren't teaching me right. So I was teaching myself math and trying to get a deeper understanding of mathematics. And, I started to see that, oh, wow, there's this like mystical and spiritual side to math and numbers that I'd never thought about before. And that really opened up math for me. And so I was listening to a few other interviews on that radio show because I found it interesting. And this guy came on, his name was Alan Watts. It's not not the philosopher.
I was like, wow, I thought he was like long dead at that point.
That would be like your initiation into like the real Mandela effect, Meredith. He was on. Okay. Yeah. Anyways, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, this guy had like I guess at that time, this was 2005, 2006. I'm sure YouTube existed, but I was not on Facebook. I was not on YouTube. Social media wasn't my thing. I didn't have a cell phone, right? I had an iPod, and that's about it. So I could download audio files onto this iPod. And this guy had his own website. He had all of these shows that he had done, like radio broadcasts. And he had done a shortwave radio show with this woman in Canada, I think. And he was talking about all of this alternative history and things that I had never been taught or heard before. And he was talking about the Masons and all of this scary stuff. And to me at the time, it was kind of scary. It was like, whoa, I've been lied to.
Yeah, that first initial punch in the face.
And I think I went through a deep depression for about a month after really just consuming so much of this stuff. And my interest from the get-go was about like sacred geometry and, you know, the golden ratio and all of the pyramids and all of that stuff. So I kind of went down that little rabbit hole in the beginning. And after the depression wore off, I actually got really excited about life again. Like, oh my God, there's all of this stuff I didn't even know. And I just wanted to tell everybody about it. And of course, I quickly found out that nobody wants to hear about it.
Yeah.
That's a mood. Yeah.
There.
And from that point on, you know, from 2006 onward, Pandora's box was opened. I was not going to go back into the matrix and have that juicy steak, right? It wasn't going to happen. So I went through many phases, right? 9/11, you know, looking at secret societies. There were so many times I thought I'd had everything all figured out, only to find something that just blew my mind and challenged my perception of reality yet again. And that's been the theme up until this point. So that's kind of like the short version of it, I guess.
Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah.
Do you mind if I have one more question on this, Mare?
No.
You mentioned that you were in the military and that 9/11 was a part of your awakening, as I'm sure it was like a major part of a lot of people's. How did that event play into your military action, or how did that event kind of change your perception, I guess, is my big question, because that mass trauma for United States, if you were like coming of age or maybe just like in your 20s at that time, even like that was a wild ride. And I'm curious to see how that affected you.
Yeah, well, I joined the military in 1996.
I see. Okay.
I graduated high school in 95, and then I went to Chicago, and I was working up in Chicago for about a year or so for this Japanese company, and just didn't want to go to college, didn't know what I wanted to do, just wanted life experience. But in 96, I moved back home, and a friend of mine that I know from grade school, he and I had stayed friends through the years, and he had joined the Navy, and he talked me into going to the recruiter's office. And I remember I had gotten a job at Hardee's, and it was like my third day, and I was working the lunch rush, and I remember just taking a break, going out to my car, crying, because it was such an awful job. I worked, you know, the person training me was 16 years old and almost like 6 months pregnant with somebody's baby that worked on the prep line in the back. And
you saw different for your future. Yeah. You saw different, definitely.
So I thought, sure, I'll go into the military.
Wow. And
you know, being in the military, I got to see firsthand what the military is all about. And it's just, man, I could just talk about that for hours, but I'm not going to bore you with all of that. Just to say that being in the military really opened my eyes to kind of the way the world works. And in a way, that was my first real taste of some kind of reality that I had been lied to about. And it wasn't, I was in the Persian Gulf during the 90s when this whole Iraq thing was going on, Saddam Hussein and all of these, they said he had, you know, chemical weapons. And so we were there flying airplanes around with fake bombs and fake missiles that don't blow anything up.
Wow.
That's what we did. And that was my job, was to, you know, load bombs and missiles onto airplanes, and none of them had fuses in them. Very rarely did they ever fly live missiles or bombs.
Wow.
So it was like all we did out there, we just pretended. That's what we were doing, was pretending. And we cleaned lots of stuff got cleaned on the ship.
That's interesting. Very interesting.
But as far as 9/11 goes, I got out in 2000, and I was out in the middle of the Persian Gulf. Yeah. So I get out right before the bombing of the USS Cole, because you guys remember that preceded 9/11 by maybe a year or less than a year.
Oh my gosh.
And that was kind of like the harbinger of things to come. And so at the time it was a huge deal, but I had left the ship I was on and been flown back to Virginia and was processing out of the military when that occurred. So I just got out in time. And then of course, by the time, the war in Iraq was really going on, I had just missed that 4-year window where they could call me back and force me to go back.
Yay.
Yeah. Wow.
9/11 was kind of an interest. So it's so intricately tied up with like the death of my mother, because that was 2001. I was out of the military. I'd moved to Cincinnati with a friend of mine from the military, and my mom had gotten cancer and passed away. That was like early 2001. And then I ended up moving back home because I felt lost at this point, and I wanted to go back to school, and I was like, I'm going to be a doctor because my mom died of cancer. So I'm going to be a brain surgeon. That was my brilliant thought process.
Gotta start somewhere.
Yeah, I got to start somewhere. So I moved back home. And so I was living in the house with my stepfather, who at that time, just shortly after my mom died, he was already dating another woman who had just lost her husband. And he was getting ready to sell the house and pretty much all of their possessions and build a log cabin.
Oh, no.
So that's what was going on. I had gotten a job working for my uncle's catering company. And my intention was to start taking classes, at junior college. And so that's what was going on. And I remember waking up one morning and there was 9/11 was going on. And I can remember not being that interested.
Well, yeah, you had like your own personal 9/11 occurring. Like you couldn't quite, that's
right.
That's a lot, Erik. That sucks. That's like I lost my dad to cancer and my mom didn't do that. And it was hard enough. I can't even imagine that sounds like an absolute personal journey through hell. I'm so sorry.
Well, I've definitely healed from that, but yeah, it took a while. I mean, it was with me for years afterwards. But I feel very connected to my mom in a way, through that process of grieving. I can remember almost feeling her presence, like in the breeze. Or there was a time I went hiking not that long ago, and I was hiking like 30 miles and I had blisters on my feet and I could barely walk anymore. And I had miles to go. And it was like my mom came to me and walked with me, and I couldn't feel any pain, but I could just feel my mom's presence, and she was telling me everything was going to be okay. And before I knew it, I was like off the trail and heading into like a shopping center where I could call somebody to come pick me up. Nice. So I feel like there's that connection still, but as far as like the grieving part, that's been past for a long time.
Sure.
But of course it was raw. It was that same year.
Yeah.
And here's 9/11's going on. I'm just so disconnected from politics in the world. I just got out of the military. I was like, I want nothing to do with the government anymore.
Right.
And totally. So people were freaking out around me, and I can remember getting really annoyed with them. Just going, we're in the Midwest. Why do you think people are going to fly planes into your dad's bank or a school that's in the middle of the suburbs out here? That's not, doesn't make any sense.
Spoken like a true jaded man. I had friends that responded like that for sure, that had already been through a lot of stuff. I think that was it's interesting that you lost your mom at that time, because not to degrade your mom, and this is like totally in honor of that. I'm going to make a connection, but I'm going to bring up Alex Jones, just, trigger warning.
Nice. I want to see where this goes.
Well, Alex Jones covered the whole cremation of care thing. And so I thought I've always connected that with 9/11, and also like this idea of like what is missing with 9/11. And it's like the dream and like the trust kind of went away. And like the mom, the care, like the motherly like figure. And it's interesting that at the time, like the country sort of I don't think it was like as obvious like that the country lost its mother, but in a way we kind of lost that like motherly kind of care that we used to have for each other. Maybe I'm being naive and like looking back on things with like rosy colored glasses or something, but I just remember the 90s, like a distinct feeling of things not feeling as fucked up as they did in the 2000s. The 2000s post 9/11, everything just felt so whack. I mean, everything just like changed, with the TSA and with flights and with national security and everything. And so it just kind of, we stopped trusting each other. And I find that analog between the country's mother, or like the archetype of mother, and then like your mother, especially with your placement so close to the capital. Very interesting.
And America is a Cancer, like in America's natal chart is allegedly like a Cancer, which is the sign that has to do with mothering. And I think with where we're at now, which I really do want to know, like what's going on near the capital, like from a native or like from someone who lives there's perspective, but just the astrology of the next month in the US looks pretty insane. So yeah, I would love to hear about that from you, like what it's like to live there and what's going on.
Well, I know. So it's so strange because Amy will periodically send me these emails going, watch this video. What do you think of this? Is this what's going on? And so from my perspective, again, I'm not in DC every single day. I don't really leave my my place that often unless it's to go out and do some hiking or something. So
right.
I just want to preface this by saying I'm by no means like an expert on everything that's going on here, but I do happen to work for a government agency, the Department of Labor, which is located right next to the Capitol building. So we often get emails about things that are happening or street closures or other things that are affecting that area. Okay. So I am kind of kept abreast about what's happening from one perspective. And then now I just found out that I got an email the other day that there was a March for Life thing going on. So there was going to be all of these street closures. But another thing that's happening, I think right now, in fact, or today, was the anti-mandate march. And I don't know, you guys are familiar with that guy JP. He's a comedian on YouTube. I love JP. He was supposed to be emceeing the thing, right? And so that's how I heard about it. But we got absolutely no email about that, no notification that was even a thing that was going on. Because they don't want people to know that there are people protesting against mandates and stuff in DC. Because DC is horrible. DC is, my dad came over Christmas and he always stays in Alexandria, which is on the Virginia side, because it's really close to where I live in Arlington. But this time he decided to stay like right close to the White House in DC. Nice. And he never does that because DC has vaccine mandates and they have mask mandates. You have to have I think it's just gyms, restaurants, and some like maybe stores, things like that you have to have a vaccine passport. Yikes. And my dad's like very much on board with those things. In fact, it makes him feel comfortable to know that he's staying in a place that has that much intense mandates.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, no judgment. Like, I'm sure your dad is a really, really cool dude, I like to try on someone's mindset that feels that way is definitely like an exercise in like, in compassion and opening my mind and all of that stuff, because I can't like, I guess it is like, it does provide this like illusion of safety for sure for somebody who believes in all of the different things.
It's interesting with that. It's such a place of fear. And that's the more that because when I first started Gold Pill, I would laugh so hard at people with that reaction because I was like, it's just so out of touch. But then it's like we start, unpeeling or, peeling the layers back of the onion, and we see that the Supreme Court justice has these like bizarre notions about what's going on, which I've talked about. And we start realizing that people are like, they are so out of scale with what is actually going on in the deaths, and they don't want to look into it because I think there's this idea that if you look into it further than you think, like you're a bad person because you're not going with the status quo. And so there's all these reasons that people are stuck in this mindset. And I think it's like this neurotic fear. And I'm definitely not saying this is your dad, Erik, but that's what I've noticed with people. Okay. Yeah. I've noticed a lot of this with my mom she kind of lessened it a little bit, but I have been in the presence of people who are like in their 60s and 70s, because it seems to be that age range is the most vocal about it that I've noticed.
Interesting.
Yeah, and they're by the book, you know what I mean? The ones that I live nearby and the ones that I have seen and that are vocal about it, and they definitely have their reasons, you know what I mean? It's like they don't understand the idea of like everyone should have they don't believe the same things we believe about personal freedom, which is hard for me to get my head around, but it's just what it is. We have such a different way and that we value life. And I think a lot of us, especially those of us who have been through a lot of crazy shit in our lives, we're just more kind of comfortable with the reality of like, there's just things you can't control. And I don't necessarily think that people who come from that fear mindset, like have ever had to confront that kind of, monster before, that idea that go ahead.
Well, I agree with you and like in everything that you said, except I know people who have been through the fucking ringer, have healed themselves, and they still fell into this psyop bullshit. Maybe they're not in it now, but that definitely, like, there was definitely a lot of people that I knew that I felt like were very spirited and very evolved, and like generally, like for most of their lives came from that place of love over fear or whatever. And now, I don't know. I do wonder, like at this point, if you are like simping for mandates, just because there's so much that has come out like in.
Right.
So it's,
I know you wonder where that's going from. Erik, go ahead.
It's kind of interesting, right? It's more nuanced than it's made out to be. I've definitely noticed people that I would have thought would be falling for this thing, hook, line, and sinker, standing up and actually not falling for it. And I've also seen people that I thought would never fall for something like this fall for it. People that I know personally, like, friends of mine, that I'm a little disappointed in them, right, in a way, but at the same time, I understand there's just something about this particular thing, because it's, a virus. It's invisible. You can't see it. My dad's a hypochondriac. So he's always thought he had some kind of malady or ailment. And I think psychologically, my dad wants to punish himself or feels this immense guilt. I mean, he's on his third wife, and he married a Black woman. And my dad is very much into like white apologetics, reparations. It's just he's very left leaning politically. He was one of these people that I never thought, he never talked about politics. And when Trump was in office, I never really heard anything from my dad about it, But then after Trump lost, my dad just was unhinged and just venting all of this anger. And I said, you know, Biden won.
Right.
Why are you so angry?
Right.
And he just didn't get it. I even psychoanalyzed him when he was here for Christmas, just as a LARP, pretending to be like a Jungian psychoanalyst sitting there.
So funny.
And he tried to play it off, but I think it really got to him because I was making some, you know, very real assessments of his personality and his consciousness.
Love that. Yeah.
No.
I've done that with my mom, and she's like, well, we've gotten a little better about talking about like trauma and stuff, because I come at her with like, yeah, mom, that's trauma, you know, like that's how this is a trauma response, like this is whatever. But definitely there was a time when she was like very much less willing to hear that from me, and she would always, it's not comfortable. I sort of forced it on her in a way, like not, you know, through humor. I kind of feel lucky that I've been able to talk with her about that stuff, because I feel like what you're doing, Erik, and what like I'm doing, and I think a lot of people are doing it right now with their parents, is like you are like literally doing generational healing, because you've healed yourself, or you're in the process of healing yourself. And it's like you're having these conversations about like consciousness with your dad, you know what I mean? And I know that you might not feel like you're going anywhere, but like that's the stuff right there. That's all I'm trying to say. That's the stuff.
Well, I
the
definitely
seeds that are
think,
planted.
Yeah.
Yeah, I certainly think I'm planting seeds, or at least watering seeds I've planted before. You know, I've noticed little things too. When I used to, I remember when I told him that we didn't go to the moon, he just about lost it. He actually laughed in my face in a very condescending way, and I actually left the restaurant we were at and walked out because he was so rude to me about the way he treated me.
Wow.
And so now he looks at all the books I'm reading, and I got him to watch a YouTube video or two that I thought would, you know, be okay for him to actually see that he could handle. He's starting to come around, but my dad is just he's a tough guy because he's an intellectual. So he thinks he knows everything. It's inconceivable. He teaches history at a Christian grade school. And so he thinks that he knows history because he studied history and he got a master's degree in history. And so when I try to tell him about like Tartaria, that interests him, because here I'm just going to show you buildings, Dad. And now I'm going to tell you how they built these buildings. Now you tell me, Dad, is that possible? Is that humanly possible? And that's really got him stumped. So that was kind of like my aha moment, was I've got to attack history. That's where it will help him, you know? What better thing than...
Absolutely.
That's a really good point. Like finding people's little portals into where they want to explore and have imagination. And they have like natural sort of like inclination to be interested. That's awesome.
And it really started with me looking at DC, you know, and the history of this place and the energy that's in this place. And he got really interested in that. We were going to take him to a star fort, but he ended up not going with us. But you know, he's a history buff, so he loves to go to these old places. And so that I felt like there's so much here in DC alone that if he comes out here when it's warm, I can just take him and show him these old Capitol stones, or show him some of these ruins that are unexplainable.
Yeah. That's really awesome. Do you, I don't know much about this, but isn't there like a crystal city and like below Washington, DC, or it's like a legend or something? It's like an underground city. Has anyone heard about this?
So I wouldn't be surprised if there was an underground city here. I know there are tunnels underground, and there is very likely a particle accelerator perhaps underneath DC.
Okay.
Ooh, yeah.
But there is a place in Virginia, which is just across the Potomac from DC, which is where I live. And in fact, I work, my office building is in Crystal City.
Okay.
But Amazon bought up a bunch of property, some lots there, and they're building their second headquarters in Crystal City, but they had it renamed to the National Landing. In order for them to come there, they had to change the name.
Well, isn't that interesting?
I kind of feel like...
Go ahead, Mare. I've been totally asking lots of questions.
Oh,
go ahead.
No, that's okay. Based on like how I'm feeling today, as we talked about before, like that's totally fine. But so when I was like kind of leveling up, I guess, in my abilities in 2020, I decided to remote view like underneath Charlotte. I saw this huge like hub of like almost like where all the tunnels come together, like right underneath like Trade and Tryon, which like I guess geographically is at the very, very center, like the centermost point of Charlotte. I feel like there's got to be all kinds of different underground cities, networks. Like, I feel like that's probably like, yeah, that just, to me, that I can see that very clearly, that that's a thing, you know, or just, but I don't know if it's like I mean, I don't know about the specifics of it, but I definitely think that there's a lot more that goes on underground, and maybe that there are multiple different levels even, you know?
Yeah, I just posted that thing to the Gold Pill IG, and it was all about the underground city in New York. And then I started remembering, like Sean, my boyfriend, was like, "Oh yeah, that's real." And I started remembering a show called The Strain, where they kind of show a lot of like the vampires, I guess, that lived underground. But it is really interesting when you combine how much is underground, and you combine the Tartaria legends, and then, which I don't know much about, but just kind of overlaying them. It's interesting to think about, where did they come from? Like, I live in a town in Northern California where there's all these tunnels, and there's all sorts of like underground places in the downtown area. And the legend has it's because like there were people, I guess, like the railroad workers. I don't know exactly the story of it, but that's what they said. But to me, it's just interesting. It's like, well, were they there before? You know, like, who built the tunnels? Like, did they build the tunnels and then do the railroad? Like, and I'm sure there's a historian that can answer this, but even then, it's like, well, I don't know, like, where did the tunnels come from and where they originate? And go ahead.
Did they have some kind of cataclysm that, you know, either strategically or randomly, like, you know, sort of spilled over top of whatever city or civilization came before? And then I guess like this would be like they're building on top of it. Like, to me, that, I don't know, just because of some of like like you were talking about Tartary and all of that stuff. And, you know, you can kind of see when like a building like goes below the ground, and you can kind of see when there's like some of that signature where there's mud and like visible on or brick or whatever it is. You know, so that kind of made me think of that. But anyway.
I had a book. This has been some years back. Somebody gave me this book or loaned me a book. And it was, I cannot remember the author's name, and I can't remember the title of the book, but I think she published it in like the late 80s. And it was about these underground tunnels and stuff in New York City, and that homeless people lived deep underneath New York City, like 15 to 20 levels down. There were all of these interconnected tunnels. And in fact, they would have spots that were so remote that, you know, most people don't even know how to get down there. So they felt very safe, and a lot of them never left. There was a community that they had built down there. And basically, if you go down there and you are allowed into their community, so they have to allow you in there. And there's like a guy
yes. Interesting. Go ahead.
Yeah, he basically is the king of that community. And if you're allowed down there, you know, it's kind of like taboo for you to leave. Most people don't want to go back to the surface anymore because they have everything they need down there. They have water supply, they have light, they have power and energy that they somehow get from different places. So You know,
Yeah.
it's like a whole new world down there. I know Vegas also has
Crazy.
similar kind of stuff going on with their homeless underground.
Do you guys
Yeah.
ever think that we are currently underground or in like a level of underground? Sometimes I look at the sky and like I know that on all of the podcasts that we probably mutually listen to, there's been talk of how the sun is kind of looking weird. You know, that's not the same yellow sun that we grew up with, that we remember. And I think that sometimes I wonder, I'm like, are we in an underground city already? Like, are we already there? I don't know. So,
How do
Yeah,
we know
it's
we're
hard.
not dead?
Yeah, I know. It's when we start
you
going down like
know, we
this
just
line of
don't.
thinking.
We just don't.
Yeah, and it's interesting to
That's,
think too. It's like, what is the night sky, but just like a bunch of soil, you know what I mean? Like
yeah.
without the light. Yeah, what is it? I don't know. It's I don't know. We could all just be in a dream. What is any of this? This is a rabbit hole, girls or friends.
Part of me thinks
Well, yeah.
that I don't want to fully solve those mysteries. I like gazing up at the night sky and at the stars and the
Uh-huh.
planets and asking myself, what are those things? What
Yeah.
is space? And I let my imagination just run. I love the mystery of it. But if it's all demystified, then like before, you know, when I just looked up at the sky and I just believed like everybody else that it's just a
Yeah.
vacuous, infinite space and it's just gas
Mhm.
balls and light. Who cares, right? It's all figured out.
Right.
There's no mystery left in the world. But now I like it. I like the mystery left untouched in certain things.
Well,
Totally.
it's funny because the more we unravel, the more it's like, oh, well, that's just, it's a theory that fits into someone's paradigm. And I guess, I don't know. I just think like things do change over time. And the minute we have something captured, it sort of changes, or like the dynamics change or the rules of it change. It is really interesting to constantly being, not constantly, but have kind of an ongoing dialogue with yourself and others about what the sky is. And yeah, just kind of have your own conception of the world. And some of that new concept is obviously the mystery. I know that you love the mystery, but like, I gotta ask, what do you think is going on up there?
Oh man. Well, from my perspective right now, I look at planets, stars, the sun and the moon
Mm-hmm.
as having a physical existence, but also, you know, they are beings. They are sentient as we are sentient.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that, you know, the characters and all of the mythology that we have down through history has just been describing this story that's playing out in a dimension that we just can't
Mm-hmm.
see, right? We get the shadows of it. We get these little pinpricks of light in the night
Mm-hmm.
sky, but we don't see what's really unfolding all
Mm-hmm.
around us all the time. So I, in that way, I feel like we're one layer of this big onion of existence. Whatever reality is, whatever the totality of reality is, I think we're just
Mm-hmm.
in a layer of it. And there are many layers up and down. You know, there's the
Mm-hmm.
underworld and there's the heavens. I've been kind of getting into Dante's Inferno recently because of
Uh-huh.
a show I was watching on Netflix. And it really made my mind go to that and looking at the levels of hell that he
Uh-huh.
described. And I watched another video from this guy who's in the Theosophical Society, and he was
Mm-hmm.
giving a lecture to the Theosophical Society about the Green Man, and he was talking
Mm.
about how in order to get into the celestial spheres, you have to go through the underworld.
Mm-hmm.
And so you see in
Okay.
like Egyptian lore, Anubis and the ferryman that takes you across the river Styx, and then you
Yeah.
traverse the underworld. And this is what Dante was doing in his paradise, right? He was going through the Inferno,
Mm-hmm.
going down through the levels of hell or the underworld or Hades, and then
Mm-hmm.
using someone as his guide. So you get this guide archetype a lot in mythology of the person. Sometimes it's Hermes, sometimes it's
Mm-hmm.
Chiron. It just depends on on the culture, but they always have that person that guides you through the underworld. And then it's through the underworld that actually leads you into the heavenly realms. And then you go through the heavenly spheres. And these would be like the planets. I like that. It's very poetic and artistic expression of reality versus the pure scientific explanations.
Oh, boring. Yeah. The materialist, physicalist beliefs are our favorite here for sure. But it's interesting that you bring up that work from Dante, because that was around the same astrology in the sky that we have, like that we had in 2020, was like very same astrology as like when he was writing that. And
interesting.
It is super interesting. And it's kind of like, you see it in most people who have like a spiritual foundation or a spiritual backing. There's like always this like dark night of the soul, or like having to traverse the abyss in a sense to get to the other side, which might be quote unquote heaven, or, you know, a new level of sight or perspective or awareness. So, yeah, very cool.
Yeah, I don't think it's as cut and dry as you either go to one of these two places, and one, you live for eternity in total bliss, I don't know, sitting by a riverside, eating fruit out of a tree that never stops producing, and you're never hungry, but you eat anyway, and you don't have to use the bathroom because, you know, your body is made of light.
Yes.
Yeah. Or you go to this fiery pit where you're tortured for eternity. And I feel like that is not the truth. It never resonated with me.
I gotta be like totally real here though, because what you just described, I heard in total metaphor. And you described basically, when I asked you, what is Washington, D.C. like? When Meredith asked you that, you said it's kind of like, you didn't say boring, but you basically not much to mention because your life is going pretty good. Like it's either at your house or you're out hiking. And I can't help but think, like, aren't you like the guy that's like sitting by the river and like feasting off of, you know, I guess consciousness, and never really like it's not that your life is like, God damn it, easy, but you know what I mean? Like you're not in this hell realm of just like, of, I guess, fear all the time. You know what I'm saying? Like of just constant worry and concern, even though there were things that are coming. I don't know. I just think it's really interesting because I've been really noticing this pattern lately of people just who are giving what they give their attention to is like fully what they're getting back. And it's, I'm not saying like the kind of ignoring the bad stuff and giving all your attention to the good stuff, but definitely, or to the positive stuff, but definitely this, I don't know, like resilience isn't even the word. It's just this like kind of peace that's with people that I've been noticing, even though there's all this kind of stuff going on. But on like, if you kind of tune into other groups or other people that are kind of being vocal about it, you'll notice there's just a lot more fear and there's a sensationalism and all that kind of stuff. And I just, I can't help but think, you know, maybe our state of mind and our ability to deal with all this kind of stuff as like a collective in our like gold pill group, listeners included, I don't know, are kind of that. I can't help but think that's like more of like not a heaven realm, but just like a more peaceful state of mind, which is, I guess I imagine hell with no peace. That's, I guess, my definition.
I will say this. I feel like for me, it really started in 2020, but more towards the end of 2020. For whatever reason, I don't know if I consciously went into it thinking about what I was doing. It just seemed like the natural progression of how things were going to unfold for me during this time was that I began to really break a lot of barriers within myself and start to focus on myself and not focus on every little article or conspiracy that came out for me to consume. And the more I turned my focus on myself, the less I withdrew from all of the craziness outside. So in the beginning, I was paying attention. You know, I needed to know what's happening All these mask mandates are happening, but then we realized we can just order our groceries and have them delivered, and we don't even have to bother with that. So that wasn't a big deal. Parks were closed, but we would go there anyway because there's nobody that's going to stop you. And I just had a very cavalier attitude from the beginning that I'm not going to acknowledge this. I know that people are freaking out, but I had already made a decision in my mind that none of this was real, that there's nothing to fear as far as a virus or a sickness. And there were people around me that wanted me to engage in it. And I just further and further withdrew into myself. And the more I did, the more peace I really started to feel. And I could feel myself growing spiritually. I could feel my consciousness rising. I was starting to be able to read things that I had already read, but read it with new eyes and get deeper insights, go back and watch TV shows and movies and extract all of this great wisdom and understanding about things, instead of approaching it as if it's all predictive programming or it's all just made up fiction. I just stopped judging everything and just started taking things in and allowing the truth to permeate through me, right? It's like I became a sieve and I'm taking in all of this information into my heart. And the only thing that sticks is what my heart knows to be true and it holds on to, and everything else just sort of washed away. And so, yeah, I have been living in, the belly of the beast and have been really enjoying myself and not felt any fear, especially with the mandates for the vaccine. I just filed an exemption, and if they approve it, then great, I'll work from home. And if they don't, then I'll just deal with that when it comes, I'll find another job.
So you don't know yet whether or not, yes or no, it'll work or not?
Yeah, I haven't gotten a reply from my agency on it, but I know somebody else in this community that works for NASA. Yeah. And he got his exemption approved. So
interesting.
I thought
they're also attacking it in Texas. They're attacking.
That's it. Yes.
Yeah. So see how that plays out. I mean, we were supposed to go back to the office in November, and then they moved it to the end of December. Then they moved it to the end of January, and now they've just bumped it again to the end of February. And I'm imagining they'll bump it again to the end of March.
Right. Oh my God.
So I think they're stalling.
Yeah.
Makes me wonder if you're not the only one. You know what I mean? Who quote unquote needs an exemption or requests an exemption. Like, makes me think that there are others like you who have that.
Oh, there are. My boss told me that as much, that there were, well, I guess the office that handles all of the exemption requests said that they were overwhelmed.
Good.
They just had so many.
Yay.
But then they tell you that 98% of all federal employees are vaccinated fully. Oh, so I'm like, which is it? Well, then you realize 2% of however many people work for the government, that's still a lot of requests to sift through for, 3 or 4 people.
Right. Yeah.
But still.
Super interesting. And I've always wondered, ever since like the rollout initially began, like I've always felt like they were way exaggerating. I still feel that way even now. Like I feel that there are some people who felt coerced into taking it due to like the recent, just some of the mandates that have cropped up. But I don't know. I think a lot of people are actually really resisting, and a lot of people are really wisening up to their ways,
Yeah, they keep putting propaganda out. It does seem that's like trying to pit us against each other. And like they'll say things like half of the Democrats want people who are vaccinated like put away into like, camps and stuff like that. And it's not that I have a hard time believing that. It's just that it's like the more and more people I encounter, even if they're, totally vaccinated or not, like they don't really think that that's right for the American value systems. And I know there's always like the drum that beats on in our community, especially, that's like, well, it's something's coming, and something is probably coming. I'm not trying to be naive here, but I definitely think it's not going the way they wanted to. And I think that I don't know, I just feel like there's too much chaos right now. And the more it's a theme I keep coming back to, the more they try to control it and make it seem like one thing, the more it is revealing itself to be the exact opposite. And they find themselves like, with egg on their face continuously, and people are noticing, and then more people are noticing. And yeah, I don't know. Just
not to be a contrarian.
I love it.
But
contrarian, huh?
I've often asked myself, okay, if indeed they are so sophisticated and so intelligent, right, and have access to knowledge and wisdom beyond anything that we have access to, technology and everything else, and they've been at this for so long, how is it that a bunch of mind-controlled, dumbed down, poisoned sheep slaves were somehow able to just befuddle them? Oh my God, we didn't see this coming. How could this tiny little group of irritating truth seekers just have derailed all of our plans by making YouTube videos?
I know.
So
yeah.
Now, what if the plan is going exactly the way they want?
Mm-hmm.
And what if that plan isn't necessarily to kill everybody? Or, ultimately,
I don't think it is.
If what they're doing is designed to raise people's vibrations, raise people's consciousness for what's coming astrologically, because that's all that this is. I mean, Meredith, you know this more than I do, because I'm not an astrologer, but I know that the energies of these stars and planets play into what's happening here. They manifest in our physical reality, and they play out on the world stage. And so I think everything is happening the way it's supposed to happen, the way it was written to happen from the beginning. And that what we're witnessing is simply just an alchemical process where some people will be recycled back, right? If you take into account that many cultures talk about reincarnation and believe that we come back over and over again, so that when people actually die, they're not really dead. It's like mourning over the loss of your video game character dying, right? And I think that's how these people see things. I don't think that they're evil per se. Right. I just don't think they understand something about reality that most people don't. So when people die and we're outraged about how they're killing people and they don't seem to care, we call them psychopaths. But what if they know that that person can't die and that they'll be back, right? They just need to go through this again, and that the alchemy that's going on through these lifetimes is purifying and transmuting the soul into something that can ascend into a higher frequency of existence.
See, I definitely thank you for being a contrarian. I think you're definitely onto something, but I think equally when you have that going on, you have like an opposing force that is trying to degrade. So you have a force that's trying to uplift, and and maybe they work together, like by degrading, they uplift, in some paradoxical fashion.
Good cop, bad cop.
Yeah, you can't have Jedis without the dark side.
Right. So I definitely see your point. I have, it's hard to like have a hard stance on this, because when I put myself into that sort of mindset, it's like I feel like I'm sort of far away and removed from the material aspect of it, because it's like, as much as I might believe that, there are definitely, like when someone dies, or when you experience loss like that, it's obviously very like real and devastating. And I think even if it's like not even that they know that they come back, although they may know that, I have no idea. That's very interesting. I think maybe they even, I don't know. I think they look at it in a way like it's a matter of scale. Like, if we have this experience that's happening, like so many people are going to die, and we're going to do our best to make sure that many people don't die, right? But it's like they have to mitigate large numbers of like tragedy, and it's not necessarily anyone's fault. And like you were saying, a lot of it is like energetically in planets and all these things that are kind of like coalescing together. Go ahead.
We came here to die.
Yeah,
so
yes,
that is a fact.
to say that we're scared that they're gonna, that's the thing. Once you realize that you came here to die, and that your life is really about your death and how you're going to die and what you're going to do before that in order to get to where you want to be at death, at the moment of death, something else happens, another experience. So what you do in this life actually plays into what happens when you die. I think most people would agree, depending on, the different cultures all have this idea that even in Christianity, Christians aren't saying you cease to exist entirely, you're annihilated from existence. So there is this idea that we just live on and on and on for eternity. It's just an eternal series of experiences. And at that macro level, it's really difficult to get emotionally attached to what's playing out in this particular timeline and this particular reality.
Even as my dad passed away, it was even the idea that everyone goes through that at some point, or that most people will have an experience like that. As sad as that is, it's like sort of comforting in knowing that like that is it's the purpose, I guess you could say. It's the ultimate destination. We're all just in the waiting room at this point. So go ahead, Meredith. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No. And I appreciate what you said about us all being in the waiting room. That resonated with me really hard. Okay, so I was thinking about how, I was a little bit of a late to the party, a little bit. I'm not going to recount my whole thing, but I definitely.
You're right on time, baby. You're right on time.
Thanks, girl.
Yes.
Appreciate that. But I just and this was pretty much big Rona wave of fear. Like in January of 2020, I started to have all of these creepy visions, and they left me with this really terrible taste in my mouth of kind of similar to what Nish has seen. And I was like, oh my God, these fuckers want to capture us forever and rule over us forever in a cloud of consciousness after we die. I was like, holy fucking shit. You know what I mean? And I'm not going to lie, that freaked me out, because I don't give a shit about, and well, I do. I care about my physical existence, but not to the point of clinging to it, grasping onto it. I'm not afraid of, meeting my maker and, and passing, I'm not, but I was afraid of losing my soul and my spirit, because that had somehow become a thing that I was convinced that could happen. I don't really know if it can happen or if it isn't happening or whatever, but recently, not too long ago, I had kind of a near-death experience. And one thing that became really clear to me in that process was how fake this is, truly. There were a couple of nights in there when I was kind of communing really with my higher self while I was sleeping, and having a more clear, vivid dream time. And it really does seem like I'm just going to wake up in my original body after a nice long what feels like a 13,000 year long nap, It really does feel that way, that this is all a lot more fake, but it feels so real. It feels so real, but it is kind of all just but a dream. And that was really the sensation that I was left with. Sometimes you don't really value something and really work for something and really treasure something until you know that you could potentially maybe lose it, too. So anyway.
Yeah. It's
I think it has to feel real and visceral. Otherwise the experience is like going to a movie. You're detached from it. You're almost experiencing it like it's something outside of yourself.
Right.
But when you're fully immersed in the experience, I think that's where you get the gold. But first, you have to have to go through that process of pain
Mhm.
and suffering and all of that comes with that, right? We don't sign up for this and come here. It's like you don't go to an amusement park and get on a roller coaster that's completely flat and just goes in a straight line to another station and you just get out, right? I mean, you want the loop-de-loops, you want the excitement and the adrenaline that dilates you and gets you fully engaged in whatever it is you're here to do. So yeah, it has to be real or feel real.
Do you think that if you were to just kind of like be in that perpetual bliss state, which I've actually witnessed some realms in dream time where like there are people who literally are just existing in that bliss state, doing the same thing every day, and their energy is being harvested just like ours is, you know? So that wouldn't satisfy me. Like you were saying, you know, like I need as a soul, like adventure and yeah.
Well, most people that will tell you that they've achieved enlightenment are people that spend the rest of their life going around trying to heal and teach other people. In fact, you know, you look at people like the Dalai Lama or, you know, yogis over in India, Sufi mystics, shamans, they're always trying to heal not only people and themselves, but the world, the earth. There's this connection to the earth as part of them, as their mother, right? And so bringing back the vitality and the energy of the earth is a big part of shamanism in certain cultures. But yeah, they're not just living up in a mountaintop, just sitting in bliss, not doing anything. Like, in fact, it's a burden a lot of the times. But they don't approach it as if it's like this big drag, like, oh, I gotta go like heal somebody today. I don't want to do that.
Right.
You know, they're in a state of bliss, so they derive bliss and joy from serving and helping other people. But it's productive, right? We're always moving, and to sit in a state of stasis, I think, is counter to our essence. We're always going to be in motion. Maybe there are times where we rest, and you know, a lot of people refer to death as sleep or the big rest. So maybe there is a part of us that just stops moving for a little while, or you know, we're outside of time, we're not really moving, but when we're in time, we're always moving and we're always in motion. So there could be that aspect of existence where it's much slower, not a lot going on, I guess, or you know, the experiences that we're having are not nearly as visceral as they are here. You know, I don't know. I by no means any expert on dying in the afterlife, but
no, but definitely interesting.
I do think that I look at it this way. Everything that I experience in the external world is a projection of my internal world. So if I want to see something, whatever I imagine these realities to be or be like, then that is what I will experience. And so when you listen to people who take psychedelics, for instance, or have near-death experiences, there is always a similar recounting of things, but then there's always a very individual and different experience for that person. And it's usually, you'll hear somebody say, oh, I died, and when I was dead, I was in this desert, and, you know, or whatever they were experiencing. And then somebody else is like, well, I went to hell and Jesus showed me all of the errors of my ways. Because they're a Christian, that's what they viewed things as being. That's what they experience. So whatever the reality is, we're interacting with something that is just pure information. It's just light. And how we perceive that light is different to the individual, because perception is what drives your reality. There's a story of this mother and her daughter, and the daughter is the mother is sort of training the daughter in these kind of metaphysical things and unlocking her chakras. And the daughter is scared because she sees this demon, this monster. And the mother, of course, is working with her, and she sees it too, but she's not afraid of it. And she just walks over to it and turns it into a kitten and starts petting it, right? And she tells the daughter, she's like, you just have to change your perception. And when the mother left, the cat quickly changed back into this monster. So what's happening when we see something dark or demonic or satanic is really just an externalization of fear that we have yet to address and deal with internally. Our fear of the unknown, our fear of death and dying, and darkness within us. And so once you go through that, people call it shadow work or whatever name you want to give to it. It's really just going through the deepest, darkest traumas in your DNA ancestrally and healing that, removing the shadow and allowing the light that's underneath to shine through. And then you can just turn that demon into a kitten or whatever you want it to be, because ultimately you realize it's all just a projection of you anyway.
Right. It's like that old urban myth of like the call is coming from inside the house, where it's, the whole issue is you know what I mean? Like it's coming from you. And so you got to deal with you, or that old adage, wherever you go, there you are kind of thing. So yeah, very interesting. And I'm sure you saw the movie What Dreams May Come, and it sort of addresses that idea when it talks about one of the characters' suicides when she passes. Her afterlife is very depressing. And it always kind of left me with the impression that our state of emotional state, as well as our concept of the afterlife, plays a large part into what we experience. But you're absolutely right. I've heard lots of people talk about their time where they believe they were in heaven or in hell or whatever, and I used to get really freaked out when I would hear people talk about their time in hell, thinking, oh no, what if this is that? And honestly, the more I exposed myself to ideas like that, the more metered and calm I was able to be when thinking about them more and more. But yeah, definitely lots of projection happening in like the early days of my conspiracy journey, for sure. Lots of pointing out satanic stuff and lots of that kind of, but yeah, I guess in a way it sort of burns off because I don't really do it as much. And in a way I sort of, I don't appreciate the Satanists, but I definitely look at them sort of more as people are just what they are. And maybe our idea of what is going on, maybe we just have to like come up with a concept to describe the atrocities that we see. And yeah, you got to learn how to deal with what you're seeing. I guess that's the main point of getting through all this, is how can you walk the walk after you have seen all the things that you've seen.
Yeah, it can get difficult. I mean, some people just get stuck in certain places within themselves. They kind of plateau on something. And like, I've done this so many times. That's why I can relate to people when they get stuck somewhere. And it's difficult to accept new information that contradicts what they've already come to believe is the truth. It's like, when you tell somebody you've been lied to, then immediately once they accept that, they want to know, well, then what's the truth? And then if you give them a truth that's not really any more true than what they believed before, then you go through this so many times, people can start to feel like what is truth anyway. But a lot of people don't like that. It's uncomfortable. So they like to stick to one spot where they get to. They feel like they've got it all figured out. They know what's going on and they know how to go forward and what we need to do. And they want to tell everybody what we need to do. And of course, that for them, that is true.
That's always the thing. It's like I've seen this a lot since 2020 of like, we should unite but like how I want to unite and under only these belief systems that I carry. And like, it's very interesting how people can say like, we need to unify, we need to unify, we need to unify. Okay, what if you have to unify with some Satanists? Like, what if you have to unify with your Trump supporter neighbors? Like, what if you have to unify with, A, B, C, D, E? And it's so interesting how, yeah.
Well, it's funny we were talking about shadow work, because the shadow for so many people in the word unity is hilarious. And you're absolutely right. I don't think a lot of people, myself included, every time I consider unity to be everybody, you know what I mean? Because you always kind of have this harmonious idea, but yeah, coexistence is a bitch, and it's just what it is. We all gotta live with it, guys. But absolutely, you want to understand someone's shadow. The word unity and what they include in that would be a really great first step, I think.
What's going on with this Pluto return I keep hearing people talking about?
Well,
Meredith,
let's talk about it. So every just about 250 years, really more like 248 years, there is basically, when a nation originates or is born, Pluto, which is the planet of death and rebirth and, transformation, change, the underworld additionally, and can have to do with like those with power dynamics. Like we've all experienced, maybe we've all experienced those in relationships where there's like that really unhealthy like power battle dynamic. That's a very like the empath narcissist dynamic is a very good example of like a Plutonian dynamic. But anyway, so Pluto is a place when a nation is founded, and then it takes about 250 years for Pluto to come right back around to where it was when the nation was founded. So in 1776, Pluto was in Capricorn at the 26th, 27th degree. And that very same degree is what is coming up in February. Like the exact Pluto return is coming up in February, which means that, I don't know, we've just all been anticipating something. I don't think anybody knows exactly what it is. Like there's a bunch of different things that could happen and may all happen. I don't fucking know, but there's like a cyber attack or like a cyber security thread. There's like now a war thread that's like coming up really, really strong. I'm watching that. That to me, that is looking really like it's lighting up for this Pluto return as the war narrative. And, there's also, but basically the idea is that, either this empire will like officially fall, or, America can be reborn into something else. And I know that if you ever read like Manly P. Hall or like some of the quote unquote light occultists, there's like there's a desire to make like America into the new Atlantis or something like that, like sort of but I don't know. I mean, I don't really know exactly what is going to happen, but I know that likely something. I mean, it kind of seems like, just based on my perception of it, that the economy is kind of holding on by like a thread or like tape and hope, so that kind
there's definitely some I think some dicey news on the horizon for the stock market with interest rates. So I think you might be seeing some volatility in that regard for sure. Yeah.
And okay, go on. Sorry.
Go ahead. No, I want to hear what you have to say, because I want you to feel it out, and then I have a question.
Okay, sure. So the last thing that I was going to say was the Pluto return is happening in the US chart's second house. And it's opposite the US's sun, which a lot of this has to do with like quote unquote enemies, foreign and domestic, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. You know what I mean? And also it has to do with our values as a country. Like, I really feel like there's just like this deciding moment of like, what are we really going to do here? You know what I mean? Like, are we actually going to like give these ideals, at least? Are we going to give that over to like a foreign entity or like a foreign type of energy, power, whatever? There's a lot of like foreign energies collecting debts that I get from looking at the Pluto return chart. But anyways, that's all. Go on.
When I hear you say the word enemy, I know that we're talking probably like political and like countries, things like that, but I can't help but think of like the greatest enemy of all time, which is Satan, right? And it makes me think of like all these people are going to be dealing with their own like how do I explain it? The consequences of their actions that they maybe thought were like the noble thing to do. And I don't even, as I say this, I know where people can go with this. And of course, I guess that I mean that, but I don't even mean that necessarily about all that stuff. But I just mean that there's going to be like a reckoning of people and that could look different for everybody. You know what I mean? Like some people that could be health, some it could be financial, some it could be whatever, but a reckoning is what comes to mind.
And I love that you talk about that. You just brought up like Satan, or like the idea of like this adversary. I think that the people who like worship and draw power from that energy like seem to view it as some kind of like an archetype, right? Or like a
right
a force, not necessarily like this like like holding a pitchfork or whatever, right? But
although I love that as well.
Right, like in South Park. But I think that that there's something that you said that triggered what we were talking about earlier, which is the shadow work thing. If somebody has looked at their own, because we're our own greatest enemy, like we really are, like everybody individually can be their own greatest enemy or their own best friend, depending. But I think if somebody does their shadow work and like looks at themselves and recognizes that they are their own worst enemy, like then they're not gonna be as quick to foist the boogeyman onto someone else, like someone who's unvaccinated or somebody who's like in 9/11 it was like terrorists,
right. I see.
Right. So anyway, yeah.
Well, I wanted to jump in on this Pluto thing as well.
Jump in, Erik.
So I just want to see what you guys think of this. And so I have several things to say, but we were talking earlier about Dante. And I know that in, certain mythology that Pluto is the god of the underworld, but it also has to do with death and rebirth. And so in Dante's travels through these 9 or 10 levels of hell, when he goes to the heavenly spheres, he has to pass through Pluto. And so you guys just recently had a guest on, a woman that was talking about human design. And
Erin.
it was, Erin. And it was very synchronistic because I had just cracked open the Gene Keys book.
Yeah, that's wild.
I was doing a ceremony because the Gene Keys book is just like an introduction. And then the rest of the book is all of the 64 gene keys that you work through. And the book suggests that you go at it with a sense of randomness, right? Don't just go from 1 and work all the way through 64, but allow events in your life to guide you onto which gene key that you need to be working on. So I did this ceremony with my wife, and we laid out some candles and some crystals and all of this stuff, and we were just making it up as we go, right? There was no just personal things, but my intent was to focus on my ancestors and healing doing a lot of that shadow work, like really seriously trying to get into this ancestral trauma. And so I used the I Ching Oracle deck that I have, and I drew the 42nd hexagram. And so this has to do with very positive stuff, which was great. And I read through everything that it was talking about, and I was reading it in the light of, my ancestors and all of that. But then I decided that I'm going to go to the 42nd gene key because of that. And that gene key has to do with death and rebirth and letting go of life and death. So I just, and there's connotations or connections to Pluto with that particular gene key as well. So I just thought that was all very interesting. Now, that's been a theme that's been coming up for me just randomly. This idea of death and rebirth, it's been on my mind. It's just been everywhere I look. And I can't help but think that that's that Plutonian energy that's starting to come in. As far as Satan goes, I used to think that Satan was this external being that was trying to, harvest all of these souls to take to hell. I certainly believed that at one time. But I've kind of in line with what Meredith was saying, I've started to see that Satan really just represents the ego. And the reason I feel this way is because if you read the book of Job, where Satan is essentially like a prosecutor, he's just doing what he's told to do. And he's advocating for Job. He's like, I don't think Job's got what it takes. And so God says, well, test him. Let's test him. Let's give him some pain and some suffering and see if he buckles, right? Let's see if he gets the vax. Let's see if he just does what everyone around him keeps telling him to do. Let's see if he lets his ego rule him and he caves to the material reality and the belief in the material reality, or if he keeps his mind focused on the spiritual and he resists all of that temptation to just give in. And so Satan then is like, to me, it's the ego. It's this battle between inside of yourself, between that part of you that wants power and control and that lusts, that seeks pleasure in material things and food and almost to excess, right? Like the people that are running the world would sort of fit that archetype. They're pure ego. And so in a way, Satan is yourself, or an aspect of yourself. And then Lucifer would be this other aspect, the side of you that wants to reach enlightenment, that wants to become a light being. And then you have this ego that's always tempting you, like Satan did with Christ when he was fasting and meditating in the wilderness for 40 days and 40 nights. And then Satan comes to him and he takes him up and shows him all of this stuff. So obviously this is happening in a spiritual space or a mental space, right? And Jesus is experiencing this battle with his ego. The ego wants to give him dominion over all of these things because he's realizing the power within himself, that he is God. And so the ego is like, yeah, but you could use that power and just dominate this material realm. And of course, he rejects all of that.
Right.
And that's kind of how I see this battle between God and Satan. It's the God within you battling with the ego, which is Satan, trying to keep you locked into this material realm and focused on everything external, your job, all of the worries. Oh, somebody died. Oh, somebody got married. Yay. Oh, the baby was born. And these are all great things and painful things. But what it says to me is like when you begin to detach from the external world and go inside, right? Now you're looking for God and you're rejecting the ego's desires. The ego wants to, eat all of this sumptuous food and have sex and do drugs and smoke and drink and party and just have a good time, be hedonistic, seek material gain and power. And then there's that other side of you that wants to reject those things. All you really want to do in the external world is essentially bring love and light to people, to help others, to show kindness and compassion, and to build relationships and put something positive out there. Whereas the ego wants to destroy. and is nihilistic in a sense, and it tends toward entropy and annihilation.
Eric, have you ever read any Steiner?
I have not. I've listened to a few of his lectures on YouTube.
Yeah, that's the stuff right there. That Rudolf Steiner press audio channel, that's my shit, especially like when I'm, turning in like for bed and stuff at night. But one of the things that I was going to say was like, you should really, really like listen to some of his lectures on the Christ and the Christ impulse, because I think that you're really really onto something. And like, it's almost, it's very close-ish, I mean, there's different like words. Like, I feel like, Steiner uses the word Ahriman from the Zoroastrianism religion, as kind of like the beast of today, or like the Antichrist or whatever figure force of today. But definitely like some of the lectures on Christ specifically, I think that you would really get into and get behind, because they're pretty much like what you just said. So
I definitely have been wanting to start reading more, and Steiner is certainly on the list of people that I've been told and have wanted personally to read and study. But I found something that's really tripping me out is that I think even just in the last 6 months, I talk a lot. I talk to a lot of different people, and I'll just say things just come to my mind. They just pop into my head, and I just say them. And then somebody will tell me, "Oh, have you read this book? You should read this book." And what I'm finding is that all of these books that I've never read contain all of the things that I just find myself thinking.
Yes.
Totally.
Right.
The same thing happens for me with movies. And it's like, where I can't watch movies and most shows, to be honest, like I just fall asleep or like lose attention or whatever. But I have a lot of like visions of things that people are like, yeah, that sounds a lot like this movie, and I'm just like, well, I don't really know. But it just goes to show one of like, the Jesus teachings from the Bible is that the kingdom of heaven, or whatever that is within you, which kind of brings us full circle. It's like that internal state. It's which wolf are you going to feed,
Yeah. It's interesting too, this idea of the adversary and how kind of playing into the larger picture, where if you get kind of up close and personal with it, it's really awful, and you take it personally, or like you might feel shame, or you might get I'm talking about like any sort of experience with anything that might make someone feel shameful, or they might feel like they've met their match. And when you kind of come out on the other side of it, there's sort of this like, it's not like an appreciation of like, thank God this like thing happened to me that was bad, but you really kind of, there's a way that you glean silver linings from stuff, and you're really, I don't know, you kind of focus on that, and it makes you kind of like a stronger person. And not that that's like the goal of life or anything, but there is sort of, I think, a way to come out of having a very tough go at it and sort of have an appreciation for that experience, even though it was tough, maybe especially because it was tough, because the person who you are on the other side of it is such I guess like an improvement upon, from what you were on the other side of it. I know that I've had some experiences where it's like, on paper, they sound terrible, but I don't think had I not had those experiences, like with drugs and alcohol or whatever, like early in my 20s, and having bottom out experiences, like I don't think that I would have maybe gotten in alignment with what I feel is like my purpose, or I feel my best when I'm doing certain work. And I feel like I would have totally missed out on that. So it's sort of getting off of the course is sometimes really helpful, or maybe having like a fight with the adversary, or however you want to conceptualize that, is it may not be appreciated in the moment, but sort of like after the fact, you can really sort of evaluate and see all the things that you didn't even know you had inside of you that you were able to sort of deliver to get out of that situation or whatever. So I think there's a
Well, it's
lot
like
to be said.
a competition, like boxing match, where you want, if you're in any kind of sport or whatever it is, really, if you're trying to become better at something, you don't want to have an opponent or an adversary that is beneath your abilities. So you're always seeking out the person above you that you want to try to challenge, because they're going to sharpen you, and they're going to bring that better part of you out. They're going to extract it through that confrontation, through that adversarial relationship. I found this in my first marriage, was that I was married to a narcissist, and it was bad. This was my first experience with a person like that, and I was young and naive, and when I went into it, I believed in so many things differently than I do now, and I was blind. I couldn't see what she really was. But that was by design, because I needed that relationship, because that relationship cracked me open, broke me down, and extracted that essential oil of my being and brought it out to the surface, so that I could begin to grow and transform and transmute all of that stuff that had transpired. And over the course of 10 years, I've been doing that. It was like a jumping off point. And there's been other things in my life, the death of my mom and all of these other things. Taken as a whole, they've all been designed to get me to where I am now. And so anytime adversity now comes to me, I try to look at it as a gift and say, I know that on the other side of this, there's going to be this beautiful epiphany and this furtherance of my consciousness. And I know that I have to go through this, but I don't have to go through it like I used to, where I'm angry and I'm confused and I'm resentful and I'm in victimhood all the time.
Absolutely. Beautifully said. Absolutely. It's something that as I get older, I learn to deal with adversity with more grace. And that's something I definitely have been working on in the last 15 years, is how do you not lose your cool, but beyond that, how do you just kind of remain, that's kind of the gold pill vibe, is how do you remain cool when things are not going well, or how do you still find the humor, or how do you put the pieces together once it's crumbled, and how do you make it even stronger? And that's kind of the attitude you have to have now, because things are so interesting, and you can't really rely on things to be the same one day to the next every day. And I think the more that we look forward to challenges and stuff like that in our lives, the, obviously we want to have our needs met, things like that. But as far as just having our routine sort of, interrupted, or just kind of learning how to deal with the new energy patterns that are coming through, the more we're kind of open to that and realizing that this is breaking down things, but it's creating space to build something new. I think the more we keep in mind with that, the easier it is to sort of see it to the next the next thing or the next moment that keeps you going. And I've been thinking about this a lot too, about what is the thing about me that changed when I started thinking about things in terms of gold pill. And it's this idea that it's not a bad thing that things from day to day aren't going to be the same. Like there's in the absence of regularity and routine, there's sort of this chance for the miraculous to occur. And there's been so many times in the last year that just thinking about what I thought was going to happen from January of 2021 till 2022, the way I saw the year going, I thought we were just going to be in total darkness. And it didn't turn out that way. There's been so many times when I thought something was going to go through and it didn't. And I know that it's still coming, but there's bad things probably down the road, but there's good things as well. There's hope, and there's not even hope. There's like really, you can see kind of like my struggle to find a better word than miracle. You can see miracles happening all the time now if you're just like open to receiving that. And they're not like huge life-changing miracles all the time, but it's just things where it's like, that was not supposed to happen and it did. And so that's what it is appreciating the positivity and the spontaneity and knowing it's coming and just being able to look out for that. And that's my gold pill for the day.
I was just thinking about how much stuff that I have had to navigate in the last, literally, like since like day one of us doing this podcast together, because I mean,
gosh,
dude, so if you want to talk about like somebody snapping into like fulfilling a best friend type of role in my life, having not really known me at all, but I guess having interfaced, I mean, how long did we know each other before?
Like a month or like truly like 2 months, not that long. At all.
But like, oh my gosh, the way that like my life kind of exploded in some ways, like, and then having to navigate around some of that stuff, it's funny how, we're talking about, oh, well, how do you handle adversity and this and that? And it's just been like thing after thing after thing. And like, not even in a bad way. I can see that it's like, that there's a purpose for it all, and that like there's a direction for it all. And it's just, it's interesting when we're in the thick of things, when we're in the storm, we can like forget how it feels to like, be dry and to be warm and all of that.
Absolutely. I definitely have, I think it's like even Ram Dass has this thing where he's like, yeah, everyone's enlightened until they have to spend time with their in-laws, so it's
that's
like
fucking right.
Yeah, right. And so it's like, it's not, the idea is to be like as not nonchalant, but just kind of like centered, I guess, as you can the entire time. But it's to err as human, and I don't even think it's to err. I think to be your authentic self is the best thing. And then when your authentic self can align with, seeing miracles and hopeful things, then that's winning for me. But it's not every day, so. But more and more lately, I got to be honest, more and more, I just I keep seeing and meeting and talking to and being exposed to energy that is just like so new and so refreshing. And I see people that like Erik, we started talking maybe like in March or April, because that's when I joined the cafe. And even just talking about things with you over time, like the things that we've been able to talk about and bring from the recesses of our mind out into things we talk about. And now you've already had a podcast, and now Meredith and I are podcasting, and it's expanding. The idea, the energy is expanding, and it's awesome to be a part of it. And it's awesome to see everyone like level up in their worlds and in their abilities and in their senses and whatever that means. I mean, it's a magical time to be alive, for lack of a better word. It really is. So
I have a question for Erik, but I want you to respond with whatever. We've just been, yakking.
No, it's fine.
Just chit chatting.
I was just gonna say, I just realized and kind of like did the video to celebrate my 1 year anniversary of having my YouTube channel and having consistently put out content that I felt was relevant to what's happening and useful to people. And most of it's just my personal journey and the things I'm starting to discover about the world and myself. And so I just wanted to do that. I started it. I had gotten, met a group of people that were doing something constructive by meeting and having like a Zoom call with like 30 to 50 people in it. And we were all trying to work on our shit and, and figure things out. And that helped me a lot. And then I met some really great people in there. And one of whom, my friend Michael Wachter, who I started my YouTube channel with, Esoteric Journey. The idea was to kind of explore the idea that reality is like an ARG, an alternate reality game.
Mm-hmm.
And it just kind of morphed from there. We started getting into all kinds of different esoteric topics and discussing these really deep philosophical things. And sometimes we would just talk about nothing at all, just whatever's going on or something having to do with magic. But over time, you know, he had things going on in his life and he had to leave and go tend to work and things. So I kind of was left on my own, and I went through periods where I just didn't know if I wanted to do it anymore, or I didn't want to put all the time and effort into it, but something just kept nagging at me to just keep going with it. So I realized that I started it on the full wolf moon in 2021. And so I just did a video on the full wolf moon for 2022, marking my 1 year anniversary. So I hope that you guys really stick with it, because even, you know, I don't care if people watch my videos or subscribe to my channel. I really don't. I'm not there to make money. I'm just there to share my experience and my journey that I'm on, and hope that it's relevant and helpful to other people that might be on a similar journey. And I love just having these conversations. I've met so many amazing people who I've grown to become friends with, and just starting that channel opened up so many doors to meet other people who were already doing the same thing, but had been doing it a lot longer. And, you know, so I met people like Emily, I met people like Nish, I met people that I didn't even know before I started on this journey, that I've met and had wonderful conversations with. So I really like that you guys took that step, and I hope you keep it up.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. We started doing it just because of the gold pill. It was this neat little thing that we happened to run into each other. It was a synchronicity of what the gold pill was to us. And it's just, I think that when you have something that's personally meaningful between a couple people, it's kind of like a vehicle that kind of carries you. So you have we had this kind of idea that was beyond us, which was really cool. But Meredith, I keep cutting you off. You have all these great questions I want you to ask.
No. Just so that I can say this, I am withdrawing from nicotine this weekend. Erik, just FYI, if there's like a sense of timing that's like kind of off or like lagging, that's definitely most certainly why. So I just wanted to share that. We were talking about like coming away from substances and meeting our shadows, and it's most certainly been that kind of weekend for me. But I would like to ask if you know anything about your astrology or your human design. I'm not too like versed in gene keys, but I have been really meaning to step into that. So I'm glad that we talked, because now I have that kind of push, you know, but wondering about your astrology chart and your human design. And if you could even, if you know your wife's astrology and human design, I want to know about that too. So go for it.
So I do actually. I looked up. I am a reflector. So.
Oh my God, you're a reflector. You're like, okay, go on. Sorry.
I guess I'm a chameleon. I don't really know how to take the human design stuff. You know, the gene keys are an outgrowth of human design, but honestly, you can approach gene keys without knowing anything about human design whatsoever. I don't think it really is critical that you know your human design type and all of those things.
Yeah.
I still have my chart, and I'm kind of trying to look at it and try to understand it a little bit more, but I don't want to pay right now to get a huge document of stuff that's just going to be boilerplate for a reflector. But my astrology, I've definitely looked into my astrology. So I'm a Virgo, September 6th, 1976. Okay. If I look at my chart, I have a really balanced chart. So like in each house, there's, you know, a wide distribution of planets, and the sun and the moon. I think I have my sun is ascendant in Leo, I believe. I don't.
Okay, so you're a Leo rising and a Virgo sun. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Cool.
And so as a reflector, it says that you don't have any governing. I would have to read it again, but my take on it was that I am able to feel the energies of people around me and the types of people around me, and you know, I'm the only one that's tied in heavily to the cycles of the moon, apparently. So reflectors get their like authority from the moon, and it tells you if you're going to make a decision that reflectors should wait a full moon cycle, which is interesting because I started following a lunar calendar, at least tangentially. Not like I haven't sat down and written one out yet, but I'm certainly paying attention to the phases of the moon and what's going on during those periods of time and what the energy is like and how that's manifesting. So I feel like I'm really starting to get more in touch with the natural rhythm of nature and out of the, the out of sync or the discordant flow with Babylon. And the more I tap into like natural cycles, I feel like my outlook changes and magic begins to happen all around me, synchronicities, epiphanies, and it's beautiful.
That's awesome.
It's like all I needed to do was just get on the right frequency, which was always there, but I was convinced that I had to go by, the regular calendar, and my clock would tell me what time it was. But now I don't even pay attention to the time that often. I just kind of instinctually know what time it is. And without even looking where the moon's at, I could tell by the way I feel what, where we are. Is it waxing or waning? Are we close to the full moon? I can feel that rising energy in me.
What is your moon sign in your chart? Do you know off the top of your head?
Not off the top of my head.
Okay. That's an interesting, I would like to know that sometime if you just want to like send me a message into our little group chat. So that's fascinating that you're a reflector. I'm a mental projector, which is very similar to being a reflector. We're both pretty rare, and our authority is not inside of us. I think that's like a same thread. I think the only difference really is that I'm absorbing all of the energy and you're reflecting it, so I would love to.
It's really interesting to me about, sorry that I cannot help myself. Your theme with your mom that we've been talking about, and then the fact that you're a reflector, which is in sync with the moon, which of course is just a very motherly, I don't know, you just have a lot going on with mother and like the mother energy. Erik, what's your relationship like with the subconscious?
Oh, well, that is a deep question.
Right.
But
well, I don't mean to go super deep with it. I guess I didn't even realize how deep that was. But it's very interesting, something that we might want to consider another time in our group chat, because
probably not as good as I would like to have. I would put it that way. It's a neglected aspect.
Oh, I see. Interesting. Yeah, because all those things like really resonate, and since with the reflector and the moon energy, and I always think of mother when I think of reflector moon energy.
And also, like, we were talking about the Pluto return too, and how like the United States itself is a Cancer, is arguably, ruled by the moon in some instances, and Capricorn, which is where the United States Pluto is the father archetype. Seems like we've gotten into a lot of different kinds of polarities in this conversation, the shadow self, the light self, your inner like Satan, your inner Jesus, like the inner
definitely
father, and how all of those archetypes exist and kind of commingle and like in different ways and different amounts for different people. Erik, do you know what your wifey's human design or astrology is? I'm just curious because Yeah.
She's a generator, I
Oh,
believe.
sweet. Tight.
So we kind of complement one another.
Yeah.
Which is why I think we work so well.
So
Yeah.
So I've been looking at like relational dynamics with human design, like I used to with astrology when I was kind of coming up and studying it, and just with that same fascination. So I have to ask, who approached who, or like, how did you guys meet?
So it was probably back in 2013, 2014, sometime in the early part of the year. I want to say like February or March.
Mhm.
And I had been on, at that time, I was on Instagram doing a lot of photography stuff. And so, back then at that time on Instagram, it was a much smaller community of people, and all you could do was upload photos.
Yeah.
So it was mostly about photography and people wanting to showcase their art. And then it slowly turned into just this disgusting thing where people take pictures of their fingernail polish and Arizona tea cans and what they're eating. And it started to turn into Facebook. So, we migrated to like a different platform. And it was there where I found her. And she had some, interesting black and white photos. I really liked her stuff. And then we would correspond like I would with most of these people. I didn't know who she was or if it was a man or a woman. There's a lot of weirdness going on. And I had gotten involved in a relationship with a woman that I met through there that lived in London. And she wasn't married, but she was living with a guy that she had children with. And that was a really bad situation. And that was kind of like my dark night of the soul period of my life.
Yeah.
And so I think I really was broken down. And at the same time, my wife, Amanda, had come into my life. She was also sort of dating a guy who lived in London. And that guy happened to know the girl that I was dating. And she went to London to visit him, even though he was married and had a family. And so she was doing her thing and I was doing mine. And we were both kind of getting involved in bad relationships. And then somehow we just connected and we ended up talking, and we were friends for a long time. And then in 2015, I actually flew out to Dayton, Ohio, where she's from. And then we drove from there to Kansas City, where I'm from, to visit my family. And so the first time we ever meet in person, we go on a road trip together. Aww. And it was really good. And ever since then, we stayed in touch and became romantic. And of course, eventually she moved out here where I am in Virginia. And now, we have a 5-year-old son, Logan, and it's been great.
Love that. I love when conscious people are raising children. Like that's like something that I see that and I'm like, okay, yes, like fuck yeah, that's happening. And I'm glad that it is,
Very gold pill.
Very gold pill. Yes. Raise those gold pill children.
Yes.
And there's a lot of those gold pill kids out there. It's like a new generation of children who will not be vaccinated, who will not be fed all of the terrible food and all of the lies, and be raised in a different environment.
Absolutely.
It's going to be, that's why I have so much hope for the future.
Heck yeah. My best friend in the whole world, or one of them, has 2 twin girls, and they are just absolutely wonderful, perfect, definitely gold pill. Absolutely. They're basically like inside of my own heart at this point. But well, it's been so nice to talk to you, Erik. I've really enjoyed this conversation so much.
I have too. Erik. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah.
Yes, we hope to have you back. This has been so great. We've gone to so many interesting places, and you definitely give us the scoop on Washington, D.C., which is we should not be panicked. It sounds like things are boring. Okay. That
Nothing to
sounds like
see here.
great.
Interesting.
Okay.
Yeah. All right.
I mean, yes, they are putting up, you know, fencing around the Capitol,
Yeah.
and you know they make this show. Of course, last year they had the Black Lives Matter painted down this main avenue leading up to the White House, and that's still closed off, and you can't go there to drive. But there are people all over DC. The times that we have gone this past summer to Rock Creek Park, which is in northern DC, and Rock Creek Park's in like this amazing. It's kind of like Central Park, but it's spread out and it's winding, and it has all these creeks and hills and bluffs and hiking trails and a lot of really old stuff. So I enjoy that place. So we have to go through DC to get there, and I just, you know, I see people out shopping, going to restaurants. You know, they're all wearing masks, and they probably all have vaccine passports, but people are just out doing what they normally would do.
Right.
And I see people like this person who keeps driving around to a specific neighborhood in DC where there is typically less foot traffic. Very few people are walking around down there because it's just all of these massive square block long government buildings, and there's nothing to do down there. There's might be a McDonald's, there might be a coffee shop or something. And so
why would that be
times,
open?
Yeah, he goes at times where, of course, all federal workers for the most part are working from home. So there's very, very few cars down there like there usually is, and less people in general. And then they're trying to imply that where did all the people go and what's going on? And it just, you know, it's like they're trying to make something out of nothing because they want to take it out of context. And to me, it irks me. And I just want to put it on record that, you know, there's nothing happening with people disappearing and any of this stuff going on in DC that this person keeps trying to perpetuate.
Okay, so that's good to know, because it's in our community, it's good to know about these people too, because not every conspiracy has validity, and it's always good to look into stuff. And it's also really good to realize that fear and like our loosh is really real, and you know, there's lots of different entities and groups and, you know, individuals that are interested in capitalizing on our loosh, and we shouldn't live in fear. And so that's great news to hear about Washington, D.C., and that whatever's going on is not obvious or visible, and it seems like nothing is afoot. So that sounds great.
Yes, and, you know, like the astrology of the situation, like, yeah, I don't know.
Girl, I hear you.
I'll wait until after this year, and then I'll be like, okay, well then maybe nothing is happening, you know, and then I'll just like be fine with that, because it's not like anybody who's like clamoring about what's happening or what's coming or whatever. It's not like anybody who's clamoring about that like actually wants any of those things to happen or come. And if they do, then they need a you know.
I was literally speaking of the TikToker that I had sent to Erik. That guy, I think, was literally trying to make something out of nothing, but there could be other things going on. Yes, I don't remember his name, but he was definitely trying to get some action going around the lack of inactivity in DC. And he specifically was probably just trying, you know, or maybe he lives in a lot of fear and that's how he sees the world, you know, and that's what he was actually seeing. But either way, absolutely. Yes. Go ahead.
Robert thinks that the Capitol, like that they're going to blow up the Capitol. I love that take, because that like excites and like exacerbates my my inner anarchist, but that's a different story for a different day. Erik, thank you so much.
Yes, thank you so much. We'll have you back, because obviously we cannot get enough of the conversation with you.
Oh, that's true.
Oh, thanks, guys. Yeah, it was such a pleasure to be here, and I'm very thankful that you asked me to come on, and I hope I can come back. I like to talk about pretty much anything, so
love that.
Okay. Yeah.
No
All right,
idea is too taboo for me.
Well, where can people find you, Erik? What is the name of your YouTube channel?
So it's Esoteric Journey on YouTube. And Thursday nights, we do like a Zoom for about 3 hours, very much like Emily's Cafe. I put the link on the YouTube channel. It's in the header image and the about page on YouTube. And then Thursdays from 6 to 9 Eastern time, people can come in and out, whenever they like. And, we just have similar types of conversations.
I love that. That's a great way to be of service during this time. But yeah, awesome. Well, have a good night, you guys. And thank you so much if you're listening to this for listening to the Gold Pill podcast.
Bye.
Bye.